My good colleague, Representative Canino, he covered pretty much the whole issue with this bill. This bill has been in front of us in different forms over the last several cycles, and I got to tell you, it is, in my view, one of the most absurd proposals that we've seen. Not only is this interjecting the state government in a situation that it has absolutely zero interest or role in at all, it is going even beyond what the good representative described, which is the desire to treat folks that are independent contractors as employees and ultimately unionize them. It's actually going beyond that by also taking the next step of collectively bargaining for those employees, and then going the next step beyond that, which this legislature and this committee does often, which is to go ahead and actually take the side of the employees in the negotiation against the employer and pass into law things that should be negotiated. It is just, it is like patently hostile to this industry to be making these types of requirements. And, my overwhelming question for each one of the concerns I have about the bill is, what is the compelling state interest for any of this? We're here to make laws to protect the rights of our constituents, to make sure that private agreements that are made by free citizens are protected. That's our job more than any other thing. And our duty is not to go ahead and tell people how to live their lives. Our duty is not to go ahead and make negotiations on behalf of people in transactions for employment or housing or anything else. That is not the role of government. And it takes unbelievable hubris, in my view, for lawmakers who don't have anything to do with these various industries, who don't work in these industries, who have no experience in these industries, other than maybe using an Uber once or twice in their life, can come along and say, well, we're going to upend your entire world and we're going to change it because of our desire to impose our will as a state government on some innocent people that are simply trying to get by and create economic opportunity for themselves and their families. And it's so frustrating to watch. Can I ask, what is the purpose of increasing the registration fee to become a TNC or a transportation network company in Connecticut? What is the purpose and what is the compelling state interest for that policy? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kushner.
I think that we have seen this industry grow over the last several years. It's a new industry. I think everyone is cognizant of that. And increasing the fees to the state to participate and to be licensed in our state to operate. I think if you look at other states, we're not even in the same realm. And I think we recognize that that we were too low.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, except for the fact that isn't the amount of the registration fee an impediment to other competitors entering this marketplace? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kushner.
I think we will see other competitors, as we've seen already.
Senator Sampson.
And, it may be, I'm sorry, let me finish my thought. I know I took a long pause, but I do think that, this is nationally, we've seen two major companies in this area, but there could be more. I don't think anything we're doing here would restrict that. I think that having seen these companies grow into enormously profitable companies, and I'm not disparaging that, I'm just saying that they can afford to meet these fees to be licensed. And someone who's trying to enter into the field would have to recognize that there's a tremendous future in it for them if they can develop their product. And, I don't think these fees are out of line.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the answer. The gentlelady mentioned that she doesn't feel that these fees are out of line. And I would just ask, based on what? How is this fee determined? Is it some sort of mathematical formula? And is it based on the costs to engage in this type of business at an entry level, or are you basing this fee on the success that you just attributed to the companies that are already involved in the industry? I mean, what is the fee based on, or is it just an arbitrary number that was being put forth by this committee through you?
I don't have my notebook in front of me today. I apologize for that. But when we were discussing this part of the bill, we did look at other states, and we thought this was a reasonable place to land.
Senator Sampson, my apologies.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. A reasonable place to land. That doesn't sound, I mean, earlier today, there was all this conversation about data. I don't know that there's any data associated with that other than we looked at other states. This is a place to land. I don't, it seems to me that, like, if you're concerned about the welfare of the various TNC contractors, the drivers that choose to contract with those companies, maybe you might make it easier for them to start their own company by having a reduced fee that would allow someone who's just starting out to maybe establish their own competitor. Maybe the concerns over how much folks are compensated or what data they're shared with might go away if there are more competitors in the marketplace and some competitors are offering this to their employees. But again, I will just repeat, what's the state interest in increasing this fee? I mean, I don't know too many businesses that require a $5,000 fee to the state to establish themselves. I mean, what is what is the state doing with that $5,000 that justifies taking it from this private company? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kushner.
Well, as I stated in my opening remarks about this bill, there will be some data reporting requirements that will be that are also included in here. And clearly, we believe this is a new industry operating not just nationally, but in our state. And that's what we're concerned about. And that fee will be used to help offset the cost of monitoring the data and making sure that our regulations are appropriate, and going forward may need additional regulations. You know, this is an industry that is new, but on the other hand is very old. People have paid for transportation to get from one place to another, or to have goods delivered for a very, very long time. But now it's being done with the new technology. And we have always regulated the taxi industry. It has been highly regulated, and to the benefit of both, particularly to the public and to the consumers, as well as to the people who work in that industry. And there's been a lot of transparency in that industry and a lot of reporting. So we are in the process of developing statutes that will serve the same purpose within this new approach to this industry. I do want to point out that one of the states that we looked at was New York State, and the registration fee in New York State is $100,000. So I don't think we're not at that level, but we certainly were out of line with what would be required to do the work we need to do to be sure that the state is acting responsibly. I know that we disagree on that, but that is our perspective and the reason for this. We did consult with the comptroller's office in setting this fee.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I haven't indicated what I agree or disagree with. I'm just asking questions. And I wanted to just follow up because that was a pretty lengthy answer. Was it that we're going to charge $5,000 according to this bill because the state is going to monitor this company, the companies engaged in this activity specifically, and it's going to cost the state of Connecticut this $5,000 to do so? Was that the answer through you, Mr. Chairman?
Senator Kushner.
The answer was that we need to address this industry differently than we have, and that we think that that is an appropriate amount registration fee, and that in fact it will be used in part to offset the cost to collect, to analyze the data that is provided.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all those answers, except it's all over the place. The fee is 5,000 because we looked at other states, but then we find out that New York's 100,000, but we're 5,000. And then we find out that we're going to use this because we think it's a good place to land, and potentially to offset some of the monitoring that we're going to do in the future. The fact of the matter is that it's quite clear to anyone listening to this conversation that this is a completely arbitrary number. And if the state's interest is in actually promoting economic viability and economic growth that would create jobs and opportunities and actually help out the people that came to testify in favor of this bill, then they wouldn't be trying to create impediments to people entering into this industry as competitors by increasing this fee to a point beyond what the state needs to actually process a license, if that's needed at all. I also want to point out that it's extremely ironic to hear comparisons to the taxi industry. You know, a number of years ago when these companies entered the state of Connecticut, they came completely unregulated. And a shame on them, actually, for coming to the Connecticut General Assembly and asking to be regulated, and having the state government create legislation for them. But in the process, I remember having a very, very lengthy debate with the now comptroller, former representative Sean Scanlon, because this bill came to the insurance committee because it was such a hot potato. The transportation committee didn't want to do it, and the labor committee didn't want to do it. So it came to insurance of all places, and we had a multi-hour debate on the floor of the House of Representatives over the comparisons between the taxi industry and the TNCs. And to this day, there's very little regulation that actually needs to occur in that industry regarding background checks and making sure that the safety of both the drivers and passengers is looked after, much the way it is in the taxi industry. The taxi industry was shoved aside by the Connecticut General Assembly in an effort to accommodate TNC several years ago. So it's very interesting to see this turn of events happening in the short time frame since. And maybe they regret coming and asking for permission to operate here and regulation to go with it. The whole thing is just crazy to me. Section 3 requires TNCs to provide real-time messaging between the company and the driver through the digital network when the driver is using the network, and to do it in both English and Spanish. Can I ask again, through you, Mr. Chairman, what exactly is the compelling state interest? Why does the state have to engage in regulating this? Why? What is the state's business in telling a private company doing business with a private contractor, not an employee, that they have to communicate in this way? I mean, and does this happen in any other circumstance in business in Connecticut at all between willing independent parties? Through you,
Senator Kushner.
I believe there is regulation between other industries and between contractors, and I think there's a lot of it. There are a lot of terms that we set down in statute that and require companies to engage in certain employment practices and in practices toward the public they're serving as well throughout our statute. So I don't think this is unusual. I think it's because the technology that's being used now for these services did not exist 20 years ago. And I think it's taken us a while, but we do see this happening in other states as well. I do want to go back and point out that the $5,000 registration fee is a floor, but there are higher fees for larger companies that are built into this proposed bill, including $30,000 for a transportation network with 200 or more transportation network drivers.
Senator Sampson.
You're muted, sir.
Muted, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the additional information. I mean, I would like to stick to my questions just so I can get through what I need to. And certainly the gentlelady can say whatever she needs to at the end of the conversation. But I just, I'm trying to ask questions as part of our, making the case that I'm working on. And I was asking a very specific question about a regulation that requires a company and an independent contractor to engage in real-time messaging through a digital network, and that it has to be in English and Spanish. Do we do that to any other employee or employers and their contractors?
I don't have
Senator Kushner.
I don't have access to the information about where we might do this otherwise in statute, but I think there are probably places that we require materials to be translated.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd be very curious to see if that exists anywhere, because I don't think anyone else in any previous labor committee and in any previous legislature has gone this far to insert themselves in things that they have no business getting themselves in. Just because we're elected to be lawmakers and serve in the legislature does not give us the power to go and interfere with the lives of a lot of free people for no reason. We are kind of limited in what we're allowed to do as a legislature. If we don't get to govern people's lives, we don't get to dictate to them how to live. And this bill does a lot of dictating to people how to live. And it's, in my view, egregious as a result. This bill also in Section 3 changes the time frame for a TNC to provide certain information to the driver from within a certain reasonable period of time, which, again, I don't believe, in my view, that we have any requirement to tell them how to do anything. That's between that contractor and that employer, and that's it. We are not a party to that transaction. And as long as there's no compelling interest that the state has, and I would define a compelling interest as public safety, for example, the state can make laws and get involved in these transactions when there's an interest for the state to do so, because potentially someone would be harmed. We can tell someone that they have to run their company a certain way, or they have to paint their trucks bright orange if they're parked on the side of the highway, or some things like that, if there is a reason for it. But there's no reason for this. There's no compelling state interest. There's not even a state interest at all, let alone a compelling one, to be telling a company that they have to do this kind of thing. Transferring information and providing information. This bill says that the TNC has to provide this information within 5 minutes, and what the state considers to be relevant to determine their compensation. Do we require other businesses in the state to tell their contractors that they contract with the financial background to why they're offering them a certain amount of compensation through you, Mr. Chairman?
Senator Kushner.
I'm not aware of that. It could exist, but I'm not aware of any.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going on to Section 4, it says that the TNC is required to transmit through its digital network specified information with 5 minutes of a completed ride, finalized receipt within 24 hours, including the driver's rate of pay, the rate per minute, the rate per mile, percentage of the rider's fare received by the driver, dynamic pricing, any tips, the gross pay, net pay to the driver, deductions of fees, tolls, surcharges, lease fees, and other fees, and an itemization of such deductions. What I'm trying to understand is, what is the purpose of the state requiring this information to be provided to the driver through you?
Senator Kushner.
We believe this provides the transparency that we are seeking to make sure that drivers are aware of all of these elements and what's going into the each fare each time they accept a fare.
I'm sorry, Senator Sampson.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I think that there's an huge disconnect here because, we're talking about private contractors. We're talking about people that do work for hire. It's the same as somebody that I hire to change the roof on my house. Or the person that I might hire to plow my driveway, or something like that. Is the next step that we're going to require anyone that's paying a contractor to make sure that the contractor understands the financial circumstances of the person buying their services? Does the guy who plows my driveway need to know whether I'm current on all of my bills before we make a deal to pay him for doing a service that I'm contracting him for through you?
Senator Kushner.
I assumed that was a rhetorical question.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it's not a rhetorical question. It's a direct parallel. The transportation network company is hiring someone who's put themselves out as a driver, and they're contracting with them for their services. Now, the case is the transportation network company sets the price, but that's no different than me going on to Facebook and saying, I'll pay somebody $75 to plow my driveway. That's all. If somebody comes along and wants to plow my driveway, they can attempt to negotiate those terms if they want. But chances are they'll just say, $75 seems fair. But is the state going to come along and start saying that if I want to advertise that I'm going to pay $75 to have someone plow my driveway, that I've got to give them all of the details of my financials as well? It's a real question because it's a direct parallel to what's happening here. Through you, Mr. Chairman.
I will not. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to answer. I am not going to project what the state or what this committee or what any committee might do in the future in terms of legislation. So that's why I assumed it was a rhetorical question. I don't think it's appropriate for me to speculate on what the state might or might not do or what committees might or might not do in the future.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a fair point, I guess. It's an absurd concept, but no more absurd, not even remotely 1% more absurd than what's happening in this bill, which is telling a private company that is offering contractual work and at the free will of the contracted driver to take it or leave it based on what they're offering. The state has no interest in getting involved in that transaction. There is zero public safety interest at stake. There is zero any other compelling interest for the state. In Section 5, it says that we're going to dictate the minimum compensation now that can be offered to drivers. Is there another circumstance, Mr. Chairman, where we require that someone that is hiring someone to do work for them has to pay them a certain minimum requirement through you?
Senator Kushner.
This proposed bill is limited to the industry and to the jurisdiction that we have outlined through the definitions.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe there's another case. I don't believe there's another case where the state dictates how much independent contractors are paid for their services. Because you know who determines that? The independent contractor. And yes, this is a special circumstance where the number of contractors willing to work for this particular business and partner with them is significant. And they set a standard rate that they offer, and the contractors can choose to fulfill that need or not. But these are not employees. They're not any employees by any stretch of the imagination. And to treat them as if they're employees, as this bill does, is fundamentally wrong. They're not hiring these people. They are agreeing to work with them as independent contractors. And those independent contractors can choose to do what they want. They don't have to report for work in any specific hours. They choose what jobs they take. just like any other contractor, just like the guy who plows my driveway. If I offer 75 bucks to do my driveway and my neighbor only offers 50 and the contractor doesn't want to do it, he doesn't have to. And neither do these TNC drivers. They don't have to do any of this. As was pointed out earlier, it's their free will to decide whether they want to take on these jobs or not. And for the state of Connecticut to try and interject and say that the TNC has to pay its private contractors who are working for themselves some amount is price fixing, for one, and has nothing to do with minimum wage standards or anything else, because this is not about a wage. These people are not working for a wage. They are contracting work, just like a roofer or anyone else that works in the trades. Section 5 also requires the labor commissioner to annually adjust the minimum compensation based on the employment cost index or its success index for wages and salaries of all civilian workers. Through you, Mr. Chairman, what does that have to do with this private contractor and what they're willing to take these jobs for? Through you.
Senator Kushner.
I recognize that the case that you're making, that this is no different than the person that is hired to plow a driveway for an individual. I would suggest that there are many differences between that relationship and the relationship of people who work for Uber and Lyft, providing rides to the customers of Uber and Lyft. But I don't think that's what, I don't think that we need to wholly litigate that issue, although I'm sure we may have another opportunity to do so. I believe that and I know you object to me doing anything but answering your questions, but it is relevant to the conversation. We have looked at other states and jurisdictions that are grappling with the same issues that we're grappling with here in trying to understand, what as a state can we do to address this growing industry in our state. And we're not the only state that has considered this. In fact, in other states, they've already adopted some similar minimum pay standards, which include Massachusetts, Washington State, Minnesota, and Oregon. It's also been done in New York City and in Seattle. So we looked at all of those in addressing this issue for Connecticut. We didn't just simply adopt one of them, but we considered all those in the drafting of this proposed legislation. In terms of using the employee cost index to adjust going forward, it seemed like we clearly didn't want to be in a situation where 10 years from now, we find that we're so out of sync with what's going on in the world with inflation and with employee cost increases. And so we thought it best to build that into this system from the outset.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that answer. Referencing other states that also have lawmakers with extreme hubris and lack of understanding of our American system of free market economics doesn't dissuade me from saying this is completely and utterly irrelevant information in the circumstance that we're discussing. The fact of the matter is this is a private business and they're contracting for work. Those contractors can choose to do it or not. There's plenty of people willing to do it. Clearly, otherwise, Uber and Lyft would be going out of business, wouldn't they? And there's no interest for us to get involved in that transaction. No one's being harmed by it. The gentle lady said that you were grappling with how to handle this. What are we grappling with in particular? I'm trying to understand what, as I started this conversation, is the compelling interest for any of this? Why does the state feel the need to get involved in this transaction? If it's not for public safety, then what is the reason? And I will just state from the outset, if it's for a political reason to engender the support of the TNC drivers or to create a future a bargaining coalition or a union those are not compelling state interests. The only compelling state interest I can see when it comes to TNCs is maintaining the public safety and also the safety of the people involved, not just the passengers that use the service, but also the drivers, which, again, I will point out, has never been properly addressed. We wanted to have that conversation. I'm more than happy to have it because I can point out to the many, many failures in the original policy when it was drafted that put so many more requirements on the taxi industry and said, you know what? In the case of these TNCs, we're going to let them slide. We're not going to make them do background checks, and we're not going to do any of this stuff at the substantial risk to people on the street. That is a compelling state interest. So again, what is the state grappling with when it comes to how to manage the TNC industry? Through you,
Senator Kushner.
Your remarks about the speculation that we might be doing this to gain favor with a particular group of workers, drivers in this case, or to seek to unionize them. I absolutely believe that unionization benefits workers in every industry. And I think it's good for Connecticut. But that is not the purpose of this bill. And this bill needs to make sure that we are addressing a new industry and that we are appropriately regulating that industry. And yes, that we are ensuring that the people who work in that industry are compensated fairly. That is something that I believe is our responsibility as a legislature. We do that in other settings. And I believe that this is, well, it's a new technology. It is really critical that we get this right. And I think that when I say we've been grappling with it, I mean, this bill has been before us in the past, and we hadn't gotten it to the point where we felt confident that we could move this and accomplish the goals that we have. I believe we've done a much better, I think we've integrated the information that we've gained in the past. We've looked at what other states are doing, and I think we're in a better place with this bill as it's fashioned today.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess from that lengthy answer, what I'm looking for, what I was asking about is what we're grappling with. The answer was we feel the need to regulate the compensation of the drivers. I just want to make sure I had that correct.
Oh, let me add to that, because it's not just about regulating the compensation. And by the way, I do want to point out that we do have a responsibility to the people who work in the state because they live in the state. They pay taxes in the state. They are our constituents. They are just as much our constituents as the employers who live in this state. So I don't think we're out of line at all in saying that compensation is a key role of the Labor Committee and of the state legislature to make sure that people are compensated fairly. That's why we spent so much time, and unfortunately it took us so long to get the minimum wage right. But we did, and we've made a vast impact on the state of Connecticut. So regulating these companies, much like we regulate a lot of industries in this state, and I believe to the benefit of the state and to the benefit of the people who live in this state, both those that ride in these vehicles as well as those who drive them. So I don't think we're out of line here. I think this is very much, but it's not, this bill is not limited to just looking to unionize or increase the pay of these drivers. It, I think, is more far reaching. And especially in that one of the key components of this bill is to make sure that we are gathering data, both in transparency for the person who's working for these companies, but also for the state, so we can better determine what is appropriate. And I'm sorry, I got a little excited there.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the answer and the passion of the gentlelady, although I couldn't disagree more about her assessment of the situation. You know, the fact of the matter is the minimum wage is not an accomplishment of the legislature. And it has not, I will agree that it has made a vast impact on the state of Connecticut. I mean, I just got through speaking with the folks in my local ARC who are struggling to get employees because their employees have to have the ability to choose to go work in the retail industry or at the Starbucks down the street for the same pay. So why would they want to clean bedpans and take care of people with intellectual disabilities? So consequently, they're basically struggling to manage to even survive. They've cut the executive compensation down to almost nothing. All the managers in the offices are having to do all kinds of different jobs and do the jobs of three people that used to exist in their company, because they're struggling to pay these folks enough to be able to do the job, because the minimum wage didn't increase anyone's wage. All it did was distort the marketplace in a way that is harming people and preventing entry-level opportunities. It is forming reasons for companies to switch to automation. It is basically ending the opportunity that used to exist in the state of Connecticut for a lot of young people to enter the workplace. It's also changing companies that used to have 10 employees and now only have 7. And certainly those people are compensated better, but their jobs are different and they have to do more than they did before, making it harder for newer people to come along and compete. Championing the minimum wage at such an exorbitant number that we have now flies in the face of good policy making, and cheerleading it as if it's a success is absurd in my view. And this is an entirely separate distinct situation. These people are not employees, and they don't need to be compensated at a minimum wage. They are voluntary contractors choosing what jobs they do. And the gentlelady said she didn't see immediate distinctions between that and the guy who does the plowing, but was sure that there are some. Well, no doubt there's going to be some distinctions in every case, but it's much more similar than I think the folks in this committee are giving it credit for. The fact of the matter is that snowplow driver is deciding whether he wants the job because it makes sense for him. That's all. He has no interest in the person who's paying him to plow the driveway. Just like the TNC driver has no interest in what Uber's doing. That's none of his business. His business is, do I want to take this job to drive this person from this place to this place for this amount of money? Yes or no? That's his choice and his option and his freedom to choose. The idea that somehow we need to interfere with that is what I'm complaining about, and why I'm trying to make an impassioned plea to this committee to recognize this is not our role. Okay? And if you think it's your role, you weren't paying attention for all of the years that this legislature has existed and the rules by which it operates and the Constitution that we operate under. Our job is not to dictate the individual lives of people or to adjust the compensation of one company to pay another company. That is not our job. This bill goes on in Section 6 to say that it's going to require the Transportation Network Company to disclose to drivers that they may enroll in the paid family and medical leave insurance program. It's like, since when are we telling private companies that it is their job to tell other private companies the law? Are they being compensated for that? Is the state going to pay the TNC for performing that service for the state of Connecticut? And then finally, it requires the TNC to establish internal appeals process for drivers who are suspended and so forth. Again, this is a situation between these two businesses, and that's what they are. The TNC is a business, and the TNC driver is a business as well. When he files his taxes at the end of the year, he or she, the TNC network driver, they file as a self-employed person, and they can write off their expenses. They can handle it themselves just like the TNC does, in fact, as a business, making a statement about how much they've earned and how much it costs them to earn that through their expenses. And this is not about the minimum wage. This is not about an employee relationship. This is not about the state protecting workers. They're not workers. They're contractors who are choosing to take on a task that's being offered to them by a private company. They're not employed by that company. The distinction is significant, and it's lost in this legislation. This is a terrible, terrible bill in the sense that it sticks the nose of the state of Connecticut in places it's never even considered going before, in ways that, in my view, defile the notion of the free marketplace that built this country. And it shows off how the majority party in this state views their role as elected lawmakers, that they have the right to go and stick their nose in anybody's business at any time for anything, whether it's people's choices on, what vaccinations go into their body, or what jobs they take, or how they interact in a business arrangement. The state doesn't have a compelling interest for these things, and therefore this bill should be rejected out of hand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sampson. Any other questions? Representative Weir.